Hello, everybody. Welcome to another session of the Global Foresight Summit. We are here now with Sylvia Galluser. Sylvia is the founder and chief executive officer of Silicon Humanism. She has been advising more than 500 tech companies on their strategy, business development, and funding for the past 15 years. And she has been conducting foresight research on the future of health, well-aging, social interaction, future and work and lifelong learning, transformation in mobility and retail, future of mind, transhumanism. And she's going to talk now about a philosophy of the futures. So welcome, Sylvia, to the Global Foresight Summit.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here. Pleasure. I will share my screen as starters so you can see what we're going to talk about today. So we're going to talk about a philosophy of the futures. So first of all, let me tell you, I am extremely excited to be part of this large foresight practitioners reunion or gathering. I have heard such inspiring content so far. It's been so inspiring to hear about all these people all over the world dealing with futures and trying to increase and improve the way we conduct foresight research. I'm thinking of one I heard yesterday, can philosophy enrich the practice of foresight? And Chris Meyer has been wonderful about bringing a perspective about ethics and human uniqueness and how this philosophical practice is part of building our foresight practice. So I hope I will be able to bring as much content and as much insights as has been done so far. So it's my turn to tell you about my topic, a philosophy of the futures. And what I suggest is to start with why I chose to talk about that topic. Let me see if I can move in the slides. Okay, so first of all, the choice of the topic, a philosophy of the futures, came from a few considerations. The first one was linked to the fact that there's a regain in curiosity for the philosophical practice. It's not new, but it's changing form. So in itself, it's something moving around, moving with time. 50 years ago, there were the first philosophical cafe. You had Sartre, Simone de Beauvoir in Paris, very famous, and conducting conversation live with people. But this trend moved on for a while, and in the 90s and beginning of the millennium, there was also a lot of cafe, like live conversation. But then philosophy was also present in preschools. You had it also in corporations. You had it under very different forms. Like you could have workshops, team building workshops around philosophy and so on. And then, of course, with digitization, all this philosophical approach and the fact that people wanted to share their philosophy of life around topics that spoke to them, it gained more and more popularity on social media. So you had radio show, you have a lot of conversation on Twitter, and of course now you have also this conversation on Clubhouse. So I was very interested in seeing first what was happening in the field of philosophy of the future. The second thing, and here I'm really once again thanking Chris Meyer for this wonderful conversation he was giving yesterday. His presentation really focused on how philosophy could be a foundation to our strategic foresight practice. And I mean, in the field of future thinking, from casual future thinker to professional futurists, we include philosophy all the time in our thinking, even really realizing it. But we can also learn further from philosophy in order to enrich our practice, the way we conduct foresight. And I truly believe like a philosophical approach can make us better futurists. And Chris perfectly illustrated it yesterday by articulating our ethical obligation as futurists. And finally, the future as a core topic for philosophers, I think is still underdefined. It's really hard to find a philosophy of the future. When you search actually for it, you find what could be the philosophy in the future, but you don't have the philosophy applied to the topic of the future. Most of the time, it's a subtopic of other topic. You can think, for example, justice. You can think death and relation to time. You can think of science. But it's hard to find really a book or a framework for a philosopher dealing with the future as an object. So that's why I was thinking, okay, let's scan over the centuries of philosophy from different parts of the world, centuries of people thinking, and try to see what type of philosophy we could build around the future. So the way I will present today, I articulated the presentation around 12 conceptions of futurity. And the idea is to base ourselves on quotes, because I don't have the time to make a presentation on each of them, but with a few quotes, we can get an idea of these conceptions of futurity. And then I will correlate them with concepts in foresight. So we can really bridge the gap between philosophy and foresight. And to start, I thought let's start with something not too complicated, which is the future in connection to the past. So let's start with Confucius. Study the past if you would define the future. Why should we look to the past in order to prepare for the future? Because there is nowhere else to look. Our inheritance was left to us by no testament. We must never allow the future to collapse under the burden of memory. It is the best reason to learn history, not in order to predict the future, but to free yourself of the past and imagine alternative destinies. So here we see different conceptions of the future in connection to the past. What's interesting is the fact that we cannot just turn our eyes from the past. Okay, there's a strong connection between imagining and thinking about the future and studying the past. But it's also not something that's straightforward because, as Hannah Arendt is saying, our inheritance was left to us by no testament. So it's our job as futurists, as thinkers, to go understand the past with the science we have from the past. We have to do this study first. And also another important thought here, I think, is from Milan Kundera. We must never allow the future to collapse under the burden of memory. We need to take a look, but we cannot just limit ourselves to think about the future as limited by our study of the past. So what it means in terms of foresight from these thoughts, it's an expression we love actually to hear and to tell when we explain our job as futurists. We need to look back to better look forward. Being good historians will make us better futurists. The second conception is about the future in connection to the present. And I love that expression from Voltaire. It is said that the present is pregnant with the future. It means it's here, it's in development, but it's not fully there yet. And we can still model it, build it, shape it. The future depends on what you do today. When you make a choice, you change the future. The best way to predict your future is to create it. Time forks perpetually toward innumerable futures. In one of them, I am your enemy. People are like dice. We throw ourselves in the direction of our own choosing. What I like in all these quotes is the fact that it's not just about connecting to moment in time. It's also about the fact that we can act on the future by our actions in the present. And of course, I'm sure the foresight practitioners among you know what I'm talking about here when I try to connect it with our foresight practice. I'm trying to connect it with our sense of agency, the fact that we are not here to predict the future, but really to help build it. We are actors, we are players of our future. And there are also another expression, another tool, which is the pull of the future. And we are always kind of in between the push of the future and the pull of the future. The fact that there's something pushing, but there are some things that we can change. We are agents of change. The third conception is about the future as part of a time continuum. Okay, you have the past, you have the present, and you have the future. Not too complicated to understand. If we examine our thoughts, we shall find them always occupied with the past and the future. I am tomorrow what I established today. I am today what I established yesterday. At some point, the future becomes reality, and then it quickly becomes the past. Imagination sees the complete reality. It is where past, present, and future meet. People like us who believe in physics know that the distinction between past, present, and future is only a stubbornly persistent illusion. So as part of this time continuum, I couldn't help but make the connection with what we call the cone of plausibility. And I think that illustration really illustrates what philosophers were trying to say through their wisdom. The fact that the present is a very, very tiny moment at the intersection of the development of the past and the future development. But what's interesting today is that this point is moving along the time, and we are slowly consuming the future so that it becomes the past. Let me move on to the next one. So coming from here, the next natural conception is about thinking that finally, when we think too much, there's this burden from the future. Thinking too much about the future kind of reduce our ability to live the present moment. And here you have a lot of philosophy of happiness around this. You can think of Buddhism, you can think of Stoicism, but let me start with Marcus Aurelius, who would say, never let the future disturb you. You will meet it, if you have to, with the same weapons of reason which today arm you against the present. I struggle so hard to remain entirely in the present, killing inside me the past and the future. I never think of the future, it comes soon enough. I am a person who continually destroys the possibilities of a future because of the numbers of alternative viewpoints I can focus on the present. Do not dwell on the past, do not dream of the future, concentrate the mind on the present moment. So here I wanted to connect that with a book which was actually at the beginnings of the Foresight tradition, Future Shock from Alvin Toffler. And this is really connected to me because it's really showing you that there's a struggle to remain in the present. And the more we are scared about future change, the more we try to isolate ourselves from future events, the more we try to stay in the present time, and the more we might feel anxiety. So there's always this two philosophy contradicting or balancing each other. Like, should we stay in the moment and shut our eyes on the future because it's too anxiogynous, or should we try on the opposite to face what is coming and maybe we'll be happier if we look into the future. The future also been very inspirational. And here I'm thinking of a lot of poetry and fiction around the future. I see the time is going by, so I won't read all of them, but you can take the time to read them if you want. The future belongs to those who believe in the beauty of their dreams. Now I come to you full of future, and from habit we begin to live our past. So the future is really an inspiration for humans. It's really a way for us to project ourselves in our personal life, but also to dream. So it's connected, of course, with the notion of dreaming. And here I wanted to connect it in foresight with what I think is a characteristic, is a feature that most futurists share. They are very creative people. It's not just about being rational, about building forecasts. It's also about creating artifacts from the future, creating scenarios, writing fiction sometimes to help people project themselves in these futures. And so just wanted to connect it with a few very nice pictures I really love. The future is also a very, very core and central point in most of politicians' conversations and talks and conferences. They like to build things around like thing that seems rhetorical, and we can think of Franklin D. Roosevelt. We cannot always build the future for our youth, but we can build our youth for the future. So this sentence have a strong weight on the population. So when they are told in front of an audience, they make an effect. But it's not just about that. It's also because from the beginning of philosophy, and you can think of Aristotle with his book Politics, or you can think of Plato with his book Republic. They were already concerned about building a better society, about what would be the design, the plan for building a better life in society. And here I wanted to connect with a strong branch of what's happening today in foresight, which is applying strategy foresight to policy making. Another conception of futurity is connected with phenomenology. So phenomenology is a sub-branch of philosophy, not always easy to apprehend, but it's about building the structure of awareness, what makes us understand the world. And the basis of this philosophy is that the world is given to us through phenomenon. And because we are sentient, sensitive beings, we can apprehend the world. So our connection to the time is kind of always an individual, and it's about a first-person perspective. And I think that connects with a part of foresight that you are familiar with, about first-person perspective and changing perspective. When we think about the future, it's not just about building a scenario, it's also about projecting ourselves as individuals in those scenarios. And Chris Meyer was talking about the veil of ignorance. To fight that veil of ignorance, we need to change the perspectives. What would the future be like if I were in different positions? I don't want just to consider my own position when I think about different future. And there's also another branch of foresight today, which is dealing with future consciousness. And I think it's also very interesting to connect phenomenology with future consciousness, because there are so many common elements. We can talk more about it in the questions if you want. Then, eighth conception, the future as unpredictable or as predictable. So there's been ongoing conversation about, and I'm sure you as futurists might have this every day, about what is our job? Is it to predict the future, or is it to prepare for the future? And we always need to remind that what we try to do is not to predict for sure what's going to happen, but mostly to present scenarios to have people prepare or react to potential scenarios. So let me just come back to the basics, like Ray Bradbury was writing. I was not predicting the future, I was trying to prevent it. And a lot of it will be right, but just enough of it will be wrong, but just enough of it will be right. William Gibson, we have no future because our present is too volatile. We have only risk management, the spinning of the given moment scenarios, pattern recognition. So this is at the basis of foresight once again. And here I'm connecting with the double curve signals of the future, which are like these elements we try to gather and to extrapolate to envision these scenarios. But also this inoculation principle. We have to inoculate ourselves with plausible futures so that we are ready if they happen. Then we have the future as an optimistic philosophy. Quoting a few, I am an optimist. Anyone interested in the future has to be, otherwise he would simply shoot himself. The unpredictability of the future means absolutely nothing to the dreams of an ambitious, positive mind. And I really like the last one, Marie Curie's. I am one of those who think, like Nobel, that humanity will draw more good than evil from new discoveries. people who have been contributing to building the world, people that we remember today as having forging and shaping our world today, actually were mostly optimistic. And here I can connect with this concept of urgent optimism that IFTF and Jane McGonigal have been pushing a lot. Like, urgent optimism is the desire to act immediately to tackle an obstacle, combined with the belief that we have a reasonable hope of success. Moving to the 10th one, and we still have 2 more after that. The future is also a fact of the visionaries, people who have a vision, who share a vision, who bear a vision, who carry a project for the future. Let me quote Sigmund Freud. Future ages will produce further great advances in the realm of culture, probably inconceivable now, and will increase man's likeliness to a god still more. Another beautiful one from Albert Einstein, who had such a great vision in a few words. I know not with what weapons World War III will be fought, but World War IV will be fought with sticks and stones. Nikola Tesla, the present is theirs, the future for which I really worked is mine. Visionaries really think that they shouldn't be thinking about the present, but really building the future and thinking about the future, while probably most of the people are more concentrated in the short-term vision. So here there's this concept, like Yuval Noah Harari has wrote a book about it, Homo Deus. We have become Homo Deus, and we have such an admiration for visionaries in our society, because we feel not only they do see the future, but they contribute to build it. And I wanted to dedicate just one conception for Nietzsche, eternal return, because it's such a strong tool to think about our responsibility. So let me just read a little about it. What if some day or night a demon were to steal after you into your loneliness and say to you, this life, as you now live it and have lived it, you will have to live it once more and innumerable times more. And there will be nothing new in it, but every pain and every joy and every thought and sigh must return to you, all in the same succession and sequence, even this spider and this moonlight between the trees, and even this moment and I myself. The eternal hourglass of existence is turned over again and again, and you with it, speck of dust. Would you not throw yourself down and gnash your teeth and curse the demon who spoke thus? So this is such a strong tool to think about the future, because it totally wakes our sense of responsibility and accountability about building the future. And I love this little meme which circulates online. This meme is showing, how heavy some objects in the universe are. And this burden of existence in this eternal return world is absolutely a burden for humankind, but also probably what will save us as a species. And finally, last conception, the future in moral philosophy. And today there's a whole new current going on in philosophy about intergenerational justice, human uniqueness, why we have this ethical obligation towards future generations. And I think it's really well expressed in this second quote by Lucas Meyer. Present generations stand under 2 types of obligations of intergenerational justice. They are obliged not to violate the rights of future generations, and 2, to provide compensation to contemporaries with respect to harms victims in the past suffered at the hand of past perpetrators. So it goes really both directions. The special features of our relations to remote future people, especially the lack of particular knowledge, the impossibility of cooperation with future people, and the permanent asymmetry of influence, do not stand in the way of attributing rights to them that ground corresponding duties owed by us. So this is correlated with, of course, the UN goals, Sustainable Development Goals that we have for the years to come. This is linked to many debate around bioethics, reprogenetics, who are the people we are going to bring to the world, and intergenerational justice, as just said. And to finish, I thought let's have a slightly lighter quote to finish. We are all interested in the future, for that is where you and I are going to spend the rest of our lives. By Woody Allen. Thank you. Now I'm going to take some questions. If there are any. So what I invite you to do, if you're interested, is you can also put some quotes, because of course it's not exhaustive. I try to scan over centuries and over different fields. So you have physicians quote, you have philosophers, leaders, and so on. But if you think I forgot any quotes, feel free to add them in the conversation as well. Or we can also continue the conversation after this if you're interested in it. And thank you for the kind comment. I'm reading them right now. Thanks so much. Thanks, Lisa. Thanks, Augustine. So we have a very nice comment from Timothy Dolan. A general formula of foresight I often use is that applied foresight is equal parts utopianism and risk management. Yeah, I think that's a wonderful balance. Of course, there's a side of us, which is, we were quoting urgent optimism. And of course, the book Utopia by Thomas More has been also like a strong builder in that area. But there's also the opposite, like now let's have this action toward it and be in the field of risk management. So thank you, Timothy, for underlining this. Also, another very interesting point by Raphael. I'm sure there are philosophers of fictions that might be interesting. Yeah, exactly. And I myself use a lot of fiction also to conduct story. And Utopia, we were just mentioning it, was actually a fiction book. Because sometimes that's what foresight practitioners are doing. They use scenarios, they use fiction, they use short films or movies, they write books. And that's a very strong way to put us in the shoes of, we were talking about first person perspective. And through the way of fiction, we can really put ourselves in different people's shoes, in different lives, and also turn our perspective. So it's really talking about our counterfactual representation of the future. A great question from Lisa. Could you say a little bit more about your vision for the union of philosophy and foresight? Well, I'm just at the beginning of my research, but I'd be happy to talk about it with you, Lisa. What I think for starters is, once again, we do philosophy without even realizing it, but a lot of concepts, as I tried to show, are really connected in both fields. But I mean also core concepts like ethics, or intergenerational justice, or when we are thinking about indigenous futures also, equality, gender equality, all these topics, we can, once again, we have this ethical obligation to think about them with a philosophical posture. So right now, I don't think there's much integration in the programs, but there will be more and more. But certainly, I think it's also a personal obligation as foresight practitioners that we have to consider the things from a philosophical point of view. And there are actually some conversation around, the STEEP model, like you consider the social, technological, economical, environmental, and political context when you try to scan the environment. Well, some people are actually discussing adding the philosophical aspect to it. But if we add philosophy, then I'm also wondering, like, should we add also history and sociology and anthropology? Because mainly what we do is consider all science, all human science, all humanities that deal with what is to be human when we do our scanning. So I think in a sense, it's already included, but it's our personal responsibility to include it even more. And the second step indeed would be to add it in the programs more and more. There's been... Well, great question from Dexter. I'm not sure I'm able to answer that. Are there any philosophical, ethical explorations that highlight gaps in current foresight practices? Well, I leave it to you. I'm not sure there has been any, but that's definitely a field we can open if you're interested in it. Thank you again for the nice comment I'm reading. You mentioned Heidegger. Question from Raphael. You mentioned Heidegger. What was he say about the future or the experience of the future? Well, indeed, Heidegger wrote a lot about it, and this is connected to what we were saying in Phenomenology, because he was really closely connected to it, even if I think he was not exactly around the same time, but he was considered a pre-phenomenologist. And once again, it's about experience. You're mentioning it. It's about the way we live the future as something in constant development. There's a nice quote. I didn't include it here, but there's a quote explaining how the future is kind of something constantly moving, and we are contributing to the evolution of our future in the middle of the evolution of our species. So there's a double level of evolution. It's kind of very, very conceptual, but I invite you to read further about it. Thank you, Bart. Very, very nice comment. Thanks. What audience have you found? Well, once again, I questions from Bart. What audiences have you found in the particular to be particularly receptive to embracing philosophy when contemplating the future? You know, it's really interesting because I started investigating it just a while ago. I was more interested in studying mental health and psychology in the field of the future. And then I started connecting with also the notions of happiness, the notion of living in the present and not living the future. And I was, why are there so many therapies about like coming back to the present moment and not being burdened or provoked by thoughts of the future? And I was, couldn't there be kind of therapies based on future thinking? And I think that many of us, since I've talked with foresight practitioners, many of us do believe that being a futurist in our everyday life helped us go through the pandemic, for example, helped us deal better with the pandemic. And so I started studying a little more about Buddhism and all the philosophy around the fact that we need to concentrate on the present moment and what was available in the field of thinking about the future. So I entered the philosophical field and tried to go back to my training in philosophy 10, 15 years ago. And that's when I started to see a lot of interest. I posted a few articles and I saw so much reaction. And that's also why I'm here today talking about that, because I think that was interesting for the conference to have this aspect. So I would say for now, the reception has been quite good and quite interesting. So I'm now kind of building a think tank around this. And if you're interested to join us to think about these topics, and probably some among you, if you are listening to the conference, are interested, feel free once again to contact me and we can, of course, continue the conversation around that topic. Okay, we have I need to read this one. Timothy Dolan is writing, I get grumpy with terms like the future, the environment, and the economy. Whose future, environment, and economy are we referring to? Well, I couldn't agree more. I think, once again, it's connected with what we try to do as foresight practitioners. We try to put ourselves in different perspectives. you write whose future. And indeed, there's not one future. So first of all, we talk about futures thinking in plural all the time, because we consider different future, not just one future, and we consider different perspective. And I'm once again relating to what Chris Mayer was saying yesterday about the veil of ignorance. I think we do it wrong if we just project ourselves with our own situation in the future. And it's tempting to do so, like say, oh, the pandemic is affecting us that way, and we think everybody is affected the same way. But we need to always try to put ourselves in different position. And there are a lot of futurist tools that we can use to do that. We can use a day in the life tool, like you try to describe what would be a day in the life of one person. You choose one persona, one type with some characteristic, and you imagine what would be their life in those futures. And I think that's what I personally enjoy in the foresight research, is you kind of don't think just about the big trends or the big drivers. You need to understand them, but you also, this is also a bottom-up practice. Like you go from the field, you go from the futures, the signals from the futures that you can get, not just the big trends, because they can show you different things, different way of living, different disruptions. And it's not just about following a quantitative indicator about the economy. It's mostly understanding how people are living it, how do they react, what do they create to escape from this or to co-create that future. So yeah, I think it answers the question a little, but I can totally empathize with your thoughts. And I love, yeah, Bibina, what you're saying, like futures literacy is, I believe, and many of us do believe by talking with other practitioners, that it's a tool we can use for resilience and survival, because usually anxiety comes from not developing our thoughts long enough to consider scenarios until their worst consequences. We fear the fear, in a sense, and when we start to really envision the future and try to set visions on this potential scenarios, it actually decreases our anxiety. So definitely, future thinking is a great tool to deal with resilience, to help us become more resilient. And great thing, Sylvain Coton. Yeah, futurism can only be systemic and multidisciplinary by definition. Indeed, we mentioned anthropology, sociology, history. I think by being multidisciplinary thinkers, we can also be better futurists. It's not just about philosophy. Today, we focused on that topic, but definitely I think the more we try to be multidisciplinary, the better we will have a collective vision of what the future could be like. And I actually believe in the Delphi method, or in the fact that in the think tank we need, when we try to think about the future, we need not just policymakers to think about the future, but we need like people, expert and also non-expert, with different point of view from different disciplines. Did I miss any? Sorry, I'm scanning through them. I might miss some of your comments. Olulo. Since the future is a human construct of our forebrain, then what kind of future does the Earth envision? Well, that's a tough one. Well, actually, that's fully a phenomenologist comment. Like, is actually the future just a constraint of us? And there's a whole branch of philosophy who believe that the world doesn't exist in itself, time doesn't exist in itself, space doesn't exist in itself. It's just all about the way we sense the world. And we have 5 senses, to plus the sense of time and space, to apprehend the world. But maybe there are other things in the world, other phenomena that we cannot capture because we don't have that receptors, these sensitive receptors to carbide. So we always have a human perspective on the world, so a limited perspective on the world. So what kind of future does the Earth envision? I'm not sure I'm able to answer this one.
Hello, Sylvia.
Hi
I'm
again.
sorry, we don't have more time.
No worries. They were great questions. Thank you so much, everybody. Thank you for the
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for your session. It's been really great. And it's been a pleasure to have you with us in the Global Foresight Summit.
Thank you so much, Francisco.
And thank you to everyone. We are back in 4 minutes for the last session of the day with Marcela Sabino. So yeah, we'll see you in a few minutes. Bye.